Do you know, chums, if you are the Prince of Wales, His Royal Highness Prince William, I think it's perfectly acceptable to be incredibly annoyed, shall we say even fuming behind the scenes over this latest shambles. That, of course, his younger brother, but more so, and this is my opinion.
There is a story circulating right now. You may have seen it. The king was in America. Historic visit, celebratory, significant, genuinely impressive on the world stage. And Harry, so the story goes, was somewhere nearby, hoping for a meeting that never happened. And the reason it never happened? Camilla, the queen consort, who, according to this particular narrative, stood between a father and his son, who used her influence to keep Harry at arm's length, who blocked the reunion. It is a tidy story. It has a villain. It has a victim. It has emotional stakes. There is just one problem. It is not true. And today we are going to go through it point by point, layer by layer, and show you exactly why this narrative was constructed, who it serves, and what the actual truth of that American visit looked like. Myth point 1. Camilla blocked the meeting. Let's start with the central claim. The suggestion that Camilla actively intervened to prevent the king from seeing Harry during the American visit requires you to believe several things simultaneously. It requires you to believe that a state visit, a carefully scheduled, diplomatically significant trip celebrating 250 years of history conducted at the highest levels of international relations, could have its agenda altered by the personal preferences of one member of the traveling party. It requires you to believe that the King of the United Kingdom, a man who has spent his entire adult life navigating the most complex personal and institutional pressures imaginable, is unable to manage his own diary without his wife's approval. And it requires you to ignore the straightforward, logistical reality of what a visit like this actually involves. Every hour is accounted for. Every movement is coordinated with security services, diplomatic teams, palace aides, and the host government's own protocol operation. The idea that a quiet coffee with Harry could have been slipped in, that there was simply a window in the schedule that Camilla closed, does not reflect how these things work. The meeting did not happen because the schedule did not allow it. Full stop. Myth point 2. Camilla is the obstacle to reconciliation. Now, stepping back from the specific visit and looking at the broader claim being made here, because this is not just about one missed meeting. The narrative being pushed positions Camilla as the ongoing obstacle between the king and his youngest son, the person who, if removed from the equation, would allow the relationship to heal. I want to be careful here, because the truth on this point is both simpler and more surprising than the story suggests. According to sources with direct knowledge of the family dynamic, Camilla has actively tried to create space for the relationship between the king and Harry to recover. She has, by multiple accounts, stepped back, encouraged the king to pursue whatever connection he can, taken the position that family differences are part of life and that her own feelings about what has been said about her publicly should not be the determining factor. She is, by these accounts, tougher than the narrative gives her credit for.
You know, whichever way, unless, of course, you do something where you get an agreement, right? And hear me out on this, because do you remember a few years back, you had Heather Mills, the wife of Sir Paul McCartney, right? And when you think about it, she kept popping up on various things.
Old enough, experienced enough, and clear-eyed enough to understand that families fracture and sometimes find their way back, and that her role is not to stand in the way of that. The woman being portrayed as the villain of this particular chapter is in reality not playing that role at all. So why is the story being told this way? The construction, who benefits? Here is where the narrative becomes interesting. Think about what the Camilla as obstacle story achieves. It provides an explanation for the failed reconciliation that does not implicate Harry or Meghan in any way. It shifts responsibility for the distance between father and son from the people who chose to leave, who wrote the memoir, who gave the interviews, who said what they said about the people they left behind, onto a third party who can be framed as an unsympathetic figure. It keeps alive the idea that Harry wants reconciliation, that he is reaching out, that he is making the effort, and that it is external forces, not his own choices or his wife's influence, that are preventing it. And it generates a specific kind of coverage, sympathetic to Harry, critical of the institution, positioned around the idea that if only the palace would stop being obstructive, everything could be repaired. Now, ask yourself, who benefits from that coverage? The same people who have consistently benefited from exactly that framing, whose public identity is built around being shut out, misunderstood, rejected by the very family they claim to want back in their lives. The Camilla story is not a news story. It is a positioning exercise, and certain media outlets, either through genuine credulity or through their own interest in maintaining this particular narrative engine, keep running it. The real William angle. Here is something that has been almost entirely absent from the coverage of this story. Prince William is furious. Not about Camilla. He knows the truth of her position. Not about the missed meeting. He understands the schedule realities as well as anyone. He is furious about the headline itself, about the fact that his stepmother, a woman he has a genuine, warm, functional relationship with, is being portrayed as a scheming obstacle, about the fact that this framing is being pushed in publications that should know better. William's relationship with Camilla is not complicated in the way that some assume. He made his peace with his father's happiness a long time ago. A source close to William puts his actual response to his father's marriage in terms that are considerably more gracious than what Harry later put in print. Essentially, if this makes you happy, you should do it. That is not the voice of someone who harbored resentment. That is the voice of a son who put his father's well-being above his own feelings about the circumstances. The version of events that Harry published, the claim about begging their father not to proceed, is, according to those who were present in those conversations, not accurate. And yet that version is the one that has stuck. That has colored how Camilla is perceived. That has given the Camilla as villain narrative its foothold.
You know, the way she interacts with children, you can see she's a really good mum. Yeah, I mean, we've all been lucky to have good mums, you know, but she is a good mum. You can see because the kids instantly bond back. You can always tell people aren't necessarily good mums, do you know what I'm saying? And the thing is, Catherine, I thought, came across incredibly well.
William knows this, and he is not happy about it. The Switzerland comparison. There is one more layer to this story worth examining, because it speaks to the broader pattern of how these weeks have unfolded. Around the same time, the king was conducting his American visit, succeeding on the world stage, rebuilding transatlantic relationships, doing the kind of dignified institutional work that generates genuine international goodwill. A very different story was being generated from the other side of the Atlantic. A trip to Switzerland, announced, publicized, positioned as significant. The teams involved checked European front pages. They anticipated coverage. They did not receive the coverage they anticipated because the world was watching a king in America, watching a visit that actually mattered at a level of genuine geopolitical consequence. Watching Catherine, the Princess of Wales, connect with warmth and authenticity during her own separate engagement in Italy in a way that generated real, spontaneous, positive response. Announcements about trips to Switzerland in that context did not land, and the frustration that follows when carefully planned moments fail to generate the expected response has by now a very familiar texture to it. What the king's visit actually achieved. It is worth pausing on this because in the rush to cover the Sussex adjacent angles, the actual substance of the American visit has been somewhat lost. The king spoke well. He represented the country with the kind of quiet authority that the role demands. The relationship with the American administration, always important and particularly complex in the current political climate, was navigated carefully. The visit to New York, the subsequent trip to the Bahamas, all of it conducted with the professionalism that those who have watched the king over decades would recognize. Camilla looked, by all accounts, composed and warm. It was, by most measures, a success. And somewhere in the background, a request was made, quietly, through the channels that these requests travel through, to see if Harry could appear somewhere in New York, somewhere on the edges of the visit, somewhere that might generate a photograph, a moment, a suggestion of connection. The answer from those managing the visit was clear. No, not because of Camilla, not because of William, because the visit had a purpose, and that purpose was not to become a subplot in the Sussex story. She did not get what she wanted this time. And that, more than anything else, is what the Camilla narrative is designed to obscure. Narratives like this one succeed when people do not stop to ask the basic question: who is telling this story, why are they telling it now, and what does the actual evidence, the schedules, the sources, the people who were actually in those rooms say about whether it is true? Camilla did not block a reunion. The schedule blocked a reunion, and the people responsible for the distance between a father and his son are not the people this story is pointing at. That is the version of events that does not fit the narrative being constructed, but it is the one that holds up. Drop your thoughts. Elo, that whether you think the Camilla framing is deliberate or just lazy journalism, I want to know where you stand. Like the video if it gave you the clearer picture. Subscribe for the analysis that goes behind the headline. Take care. See you very soon.